Hello everybody, my name is Jane Dixon and I'm the Marketing Director for Canson Infinity. Firstly, I'd like to apologise again for the technical issue that we incurred with the previous webinar, which we have now resolved. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this rescheduled Canson Infinity webinar, which we are delighted is being hosted today by Rocco Ancora. As I'm sure most of you already know, Rocco is not only a world-class wedding and portrait photographer, but also a master fine art printer. Rocco is therefore in the perfect position to share his insights into artistic expression through the choice of paper. Before I hand over to Rocco, there are a couple of points I wanted to highlight. Rocco's presentation will last approximately 40 to 45 minutes to allow us 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for questions. We will also have a short quiz at the end of the webinar. We will ask you 3 questions and we will randomly pick the winner from the individuals that have answered all 3 questions correctly. The winner will receive, okay. Hello?
Hello?
Sorry, can you hear me?
I can, Jane, yeah. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, all right. I'm going to just pass over to Rocco and share my screen with him. Okay. Let me try again. So Rocco, it's not started yet. So I'm going to press something else to start the presentation.
Yep.
Okay. All right, 1 second. It says it's started and I've got 40 attendees. If you can hear me, perhaps you could just indicate and just send me a question to say you can hear me. Ah, you can hear me. All right, we just had one problem that you couldn't hear us, so fantastic. Thank you for letting me know. So thank you. I'm now going to pass over to Rocco, and he's going to take us through artistic expression through paper choice. Thank you very much. So.
All right.
Okay, let me just change my screen.
Do you?
You have it, Rocco?
No, I don't, but I can try doing it from this end. Hang on a sec.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, I can't do it from this end. You got to do it from your end.
Yeah, there we go. You have it, Rocco?
I do have it. Yes, we do have it.
Brilliant.
And hopefully all of you can see my screen, and welcome everybody. And we're finally, ironed out the technical difficulties. Well, almost ironed out the technical difficulties. And apologies once again for the miss up the other week. But I'm excited to be presenting this this webinar and talking to you about paper, and at least what goes through my head when I start talking about, selecting the right paper for printing your images. So let's get started and let's start talking about some fine art printing. So really, when we start thinking about fine art printing, there's 2 aspects of it. For me, there's the scientific aspect, which I actually love. Coming from you know, a nerdy scientific, you know, mathematical background, you know, in another life. I love, which encompasses everything that that we call color management. And then with color management itself, there's so many different subtopics that you know, we'll delve into perhaps in another more technical webinar. But also the other side of fine art printing, as photographers and as artists, of course, there's the art side of photography. And the art side of fine art printing really is all about the aesthetics, the touch, the feel, the emotive aspect of what paper actually is, and when we print our images. Now, my photographic career began a long time ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth and we shot film. So for us to be able to see our pictures, we had to print our pictures in a dark room. So for me, printing has always had that that tactile you know, aspect to it. So that's still carried through today. I mean, I love printing, and that's why I'm talking to you today. Okay, so when it comes down to choosing the paper, and I always get asked, you know, what is the best paper for my image? It really comes down to, you know, aesthetics and what you like, but really the choice of paper, as I said, can be an artistic and aesthetic one, but really it's about completing your vision as an artist, and you have to have a vision as to where you're going with your pictures and what emotive content you try to convey, because different paper stocks, I can tell you now, and I've printed on hundreds of different papers over my career, will express your vision in a very different way. So there is no right answer. You know, this paper or this style of paper is better than one style of paper, because even now, you know, like I said, I've been printing for, you know, 28 years of my career. I still swap and change based upon, you know, what I want to say with my images. Each photo is different, each image is different, and each emotive content for each of those pictures is different, you know. So let's get back down to, why do I print? Okay, so why do we print? For me, it completes my vision as an artist first and foremost. Okay, so when you think about it this way, a print is final and can't be changed by your client, can it? It can't. Just giving your files away, it really makes you lose control not only of your vision but also of your quality. Now, digital files, as you know, are open to interpretation by the printer, and in that you can also add by the type of paper that it's printed on, by the quality of paper also that it's printed on, and you know, and you really have, you know, no control just when you're giving a file away. So I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but a printed photograph is emotive and it is very personal. You know, when we start printing for our clients, you know, printing is not made for Facebook likes. You know, printing is, you know, is very personal between yourself and the client. It's not designed for satisfaction of the masses, unless, of course, you're exhibiting, you know, and doing exhibitions and all that sort of stuff. So this, I think, is a powerful thing, you know, because when you print an image that you are proud of, you hold it in your hands and appreciate it. It's simply for what it is. You're able to get a clearer sense of who you are as an artist and really what your image is all about. You know, for me, there is really something quite, I guess, nostalgic, emotive about looking at a print. You know, the same cannot really be said, you know, looking at pictures on a computer screen, and definitely the same cannot be said just by holding a you know, a USB in your hand. So really, when you print them properly, you get to appreciate the tonal qualities of the image, and when you're actually looking at the print, and all the beautiful details that you have captured. Okay, so really, I know I'm going to bang on about printing a lot today, but it shows the choice the photographer has made more strongly than a digital photograph on a monitor when you look at it physically on a sheet of paper. Another important thing about us photographers is that when we print our stuff, we want it to last, yeah? And especially when you're doing prints for, you know, for your clients, or when you're exhibiting or selling fine art pieces. You know, a printed photograph, you know, is archival, okay? It's designed to last the test of time. It's generational. It's something that we will pass down to the next generation. And if you're selling fine art work, it's something that the investor can hang their hat on, because it will appreciate in value knowing that that image is not going to, you know, disappear or fade or degrade over the period of time. And one of my favorite topics as to why I print, it's a source of income. I mean, as photographers, we love to sell prints, and this is what we do. So it becomes a huge source of income. As a wedding and portrait photographer, you know, the bulk of my income comes from selling prints, whether it's in book form, excuse me, or whether it's in, you know, a beautiful print hanging on a wall. And the last thing I want to share with you is printing makes you a better photographer. And I can tell you now, it definitely does, okay? For the very simple reason that any shortcomings in your photography, once you start printing your pictures, you will see them, okay? You know, we get so used to looking at computer monitors that that we miss a lot of the things that, you know, we kind of glance and we scan and we need to zoom into certain areas, and we, you know, when you're up close and personal to a zoom part of the image, you get to miss the rest of the image, and it's sometimes difficult to get a true perspective of what you've captured. But the minute you print it and you hold this print in your hand under proper lighting, you know, things that were not obvious on the screen will just all of a sudden jump out at you. So, you know, like I said, any shortcomings, whether it be shortcomings in exposure, your lighting, your post-production techniques will definitely jump out at you if you know, you haven't done a good job. And the print does not lie. The print tells you what the file is actually really like. Now, when we start talking about printing papers, I classify them in two different sections. Okay, for me, I've got the everyday printing papers, and I've got the fine art printing papers. Now, when I classify things as everyday printing papers, basically they're papers that are going to be cost effective, they're going to be durable, and they're easy to manage. And I'm going to talk about a couple of the papers of the Canson Infinity range which do just that. And then, of course, when we start talking about fine art printing, we're talking about, you know, selling beautiful wall art for the clients, archival wall art, you know, exhibition, if you're exhibiting. And of course, also when we start talking about fine art printing, which is something that we do a lot through my business, through Capture to Print, is competition printing, okay, where, you know, each image is under the scrutiny of the judges, and the highest quality of printing is what you want to submit for the judges to see. So with everyday printing papers, we talk about the resin-coated photo papers, or RC photo papers, okay? Now, this range of papers are the least expensive and most common on the market. So if you're first starting into you know, the world of printing and you haven't printed before, this is a good place to start, because as I said, they are the least expensive of the papers, and it's a good way to start practicing your printing techniques. Now, these are made from wood pulp base, enclosed in 2 layers of plastic polyethylene. So this is the technical side of it. Like I said, I love the geeky stuff that comes with the printing side as well. And then, of course, coated with an inkjet receptive emulsion on top. Now, these type of papers remind me of, you know, the paper that we used to print on, the color stuff in the darkroom, and the stuff you used to get at labs, okay? And I guess, you know, all the different surfaces that you get with this are the luster, the glossy, the semi-gloss, the pearls, the satin, and there's a lot more in that as well. But you know, they are good papers. You know, even though we just start talking about resin-coated papers, a lot of people dismiss them, saying, "Oh, they're rubbish." I mean, I even use them for, you know, I'll explain a little bit later on where I use them in my business, but I do use them, and they are very, very, very good. And the ones that I love to use are the Photo Satin Premium RC. Now, people say, well, I don't want you to use them because, you know, archivability is no good. Well, let me tell you, I said something like, you know, the Photo Satin Premium RC will give you 88 years behind glass. So it's nothing to snarl at, you know, it's still a very, you know, very, very good option, okay? Now, the Photo Satin I love because it's of the way that the image looks when you print it on this. It's quite, it almost has a kind of a satin, you know, pearl finish to it, and it gives you softened reflections, and I also like it for black and whites as well, you know. So for everyday printing, the Photo Satin Premium is awesome. Variations to this, if you don't like the sort of that satin look, you can go to the you know, the Photo Luster Premium, you know, 310, which is also very good. Different, different type of surface, slightly more lustrous than the satin, but still a very, very good paper. So, with these type of papers in my business, we use them for, client reprints, things that, like I said, that I call them everyday papers for the very simple reason that, you can stick them in books. They're very easy to handle, and they do last the test of time as well. So very, very beautiful papers. And of course, we'll talk a little bit about, profiling a little bit later on as to, how to get the best out of all papers. But yeah, so the resin coated stuff, very, very good. Moving on further from the variation, a lot of people like printing on high gloss, which is a beautiful paper. I've tried printing on high gloss. Now, the problem with glossy surfaces is that sometimes, depending on the image, it makes it very, very difficult to see through to the details because of the high reflective surface. But also, as far as handling, the gloss surface can be a little bit tricky, and you have to be a little bit more delicate because, it is, as with anything gloss, so think of the Duco on a car, it's very easy to see, to scratch. So once again, not as hard wearing as, the satin or the lusters, but still, a very beautiful paper. And this, the Canson High Gloss, is one of the highest gloss levels in the photographic resin coated paper market. So if you like glossy stuff, and, if you're printing landscapes or things like that, perhaps, try it out and have a look at it. So as far as the everyday printing, these are sort of the papers that I deal with, and they are very, very good papers. Now, when it comes to fine art printing, there are two sections in this as well for me. I look at the matte art papers, and then of course Baryta style papers. Now, before we go any further, I have to say that all papers are coated with an inkjet receptive layer, because a lot of the times when we start talking about the Baryta papers, a lot of people refer to them as coated papers because of the way that the coating is done on this style of papers. But even the matte papers, or otherwise known as the art papers, they also are coated. They just coat it differently. Okay, so I just thought I'll add that in because it confuses a lot of people. Does that mean that matte papers, are uncoated and they're raw? No, they're not. They need to have an ink receptive layer, an inkjet receptive layer on them to make them, what they are. Okay, so when you start choosing the right paper for fine art printing, for me, it's all about archivability and making the image last the test of time. And for that, there's a couple of different things that it needs to be. Number one, acid-free, 100% cotton or rag base. And it also must be free from optical brightening additives or OBI, at least free or the least amount of OBIs in the actual paper itself. And it has to be compliant with ISO 9706. Now, ISO 9706 is basically nothing more than an international standard that was prepared by the technical committee with International Organization of Standardization. In regards to storing and documents and archivability of documents and all that sort of stuff. So that's when we talk about ISO 9706, it means that the paper meets that high standard of archivability. Okay, so very, very important part of fine art printing. Okay, so let's talk about the subcategory in this fine art printing, which is the fiber-based or Baryta papers. Now, when we start talking about Baryta papers, the terminology comes from the chemical compound used to coat the surface, which is actually barium sulfate. So barium sulfate coating was used for traditional silver halide, which I used to print a lot of in the darkroom, but it has that premium inkjet color receiver layer on top. Okay, so what I love about these is that they have the look and feel of a traditional darkroom black and white fiber-based print. So those of you who've done any darkroom printing and printed on fiber-based paper will know exactly what I'm talking about. Another big plus for these papers is they produce an extremely high Dmax. When we talk about Dmax, and I know one of the questions that came in earlier was, what is Dmax? Well, Dmax is, how black is your black? Is your maximum D value, or the maximum density that the paper can actually hold and display. So you know, with these type of papers, you're going to get incredible blacks, okay, and an incredible tonality and an incredible color gamut as well. So with incredible contrast and sharpness as well, okay. Now with these papers, there's a couple in this range. My favorite of late, I have favorites, you know, every 10 minutes, but Baryta Prestige is my current favorite for a lot of my work, especially for competition work. It is just the most amazing paper I have ever printed on. Barium sulfide coating once again, as for silver halide, and with the color receiver layer. It's an acid-free alpha cellulose or cotton rag base. Excellent surface homogeneity, which basically means that you know, you're going to get beautiful homogeneous surface when the image is printed. So you're not going to get that nasty sort of gloss differential that you get with some of the cheaper brands of papers. Once again, incredible gamut, good contrast, and incredible you know, sharpness. What I love about this paper, because it's 340 GSM as well, is the weight. Okay, the optical density. It's just an incredible paper, and I'll talk a little bit later on about this paper and what images I like printing on this paper. The other one of my favorites, and this has been around for a while in the Canson Infinity range, is the Canson Platine Fiber Rag. Once again, 100% cotton base, which puts it right up there as far as archivability is concerned. But it does also have the aesthetic feel of the original F-type Baryta fiber paper. So it's optical brightening agents free, so there's no OVAs in it, and it has a really nice, smooth and satin feel. Now, I know we're going to get a question later, what is OVA? But OVA, optical brightening agents, things that some manufacturers put in papers to make the papers appear really white. Now, a perfect example of what OVA does to paper is newsprint. Okay, you buy it from the newsstand today, yeah, you bring it home, it kind of appears white, stick it in the cupboard for, you know, a couple of weeks and a couple of months, pull it out and it goes yellow. That is OVAs at work, folks. That's exactly what OVAs do. They over time, they will actually eat into the paper and degrade the image. So you want papers that are OVA free, or, you know, have least amount of OVAs in it to give you that archival permanency. So it's very hard, I know, to translate across what a paper surface is like, but I've taken pictures close up under controlled lighting of the surface of the platine, and you can see it. It has this nice, beautiful, you know, satin appearance, a little bit of sheen and not a lot, and it does make it a very beautiful paper. Now, the Baryta Prestige, although similar, it's kind of different as well. So have a look at the surface, and I'm not sure how well it's going to translate through the internet based on connection speeds and all that sort of stuff. But you can see why this is the paper choice for me, especially when it comes down to printing award images, because of this beautiful satin surface, the incredible demax. You can view it at different angles and still be able to see right through to your darkest shadow details and through your midtones and through your highlights. Remember that, you know, when we talk about print competitions, the level of scrutiny that these prints are under, the Prestige just takes any doubt away whether there should be detail in the shadow or there shouldn't be detail in the shadows. You know, we'll talk about the capabilities of each paper and what each paper can actually do. But when it comes to Baryta Prestige, incredible tonal range, incredible Dmax, and the surface is just so beautiful. Okay, so now with the Baryta papers, one thing we have to keep in mind is that they are less forgiving for image defects. In other words, if your image is noisy or you've got post-processing artifacts like over sharpening, halos, color banding, guess what, folks? You're going to see them, okay? Because this paper does not lie, and it's as I said earlier, you know, the coated papers, the Baryta style papers, you know, you're going to see a lot of this stuff. So, you know, you have to treat them with the utmost respect, and you have to treat your file with the utmost respect, remembering that you know, you won't be able to hide anything. So I'll give you an example now of you know, an image and why I chose to print it on a particular style of paper. So we look at the image here on the right. Like I said, it's a black and white image, slightly warm toned. You know, this image, when you look at it in the flesh, it was all about clean, sharp lines, the contrast, and this is what the paper was able to produce. Okay, so now this paper does have a slight surface texture, and it helps actually to enhance the textures that were in the image. Now, if you look at the wall on the right-hand side, that wall does have a texture. When you combine that with printing it on a paper that does have a slight amount of texture, it kind of blends the two visually. So it kind of becomes one, and it just deals with that tone over that textured surface really, really, really well. So images like this, you know, are perfect for the Canson Platine. Having said that, also if you're printing things that are really, really colourful, like landscapes, you know, Canson Platine is right up there, and you know, it shouldn't be you know, discounted. As well as with you know, the Canson Baryta Prestige. And when you look at the image, there's this beautiful softness and a satin-like appearance to that background. This was a portrait of for a bridal shoot that we did in China. Now that background is not there as a special effects. That background is basically the air quality of the area that we were in. So it has a little bit of haze, a little bit of smog. But they had this beautiful softness to the background, and the foreground closer to the camera had this beautiful contrast. So the Baryta Prestige was perfect for this because of the smooth like satin surface, which complemented the low contrast tones of the image in the background, and really, you know, gave me that nostalgic darkroom print feel, which I just love. So when you hold these prints in your hand, sometimes you have to think twice. You know, was this printed off a negative in a dark room, or was it printed off, you know, off an inkjet printer? So amazing paper. So, you know, you really, I guess, the best advice I can give you when it comes to printing is, you know, experience printing by printing the same image on a couple of different stocks, and then working out what is going to work best for that type of image, and narrow it down to a couple of papers eventually as you progress through your printing experience. And then you'll know, once you look at an image on the screen, you'll know exactly what paper you should print it on and why. So when we talk about you know, fine art papers, you know, we talk also about the cotton fiber papers. So these are your matte papers. They come in a variety of surfaces and finishes, from smooth to slightly textured to really heavy textures like Canson Aquarelle. These are the most expensive, but really, folks, these are the highest grade of fine art matte papers. They are just beautiful. They are made from a pure cotton rag base. The drawback of these sort of papers is they do have a lower Dmax. So in other words, your blackest black that the printer can print is a lot lower, because with the inksets on the printer, one with this type of paper here, you're printing on matte black, and with the other papers you are printing with a photo black, because of the nature of the coating of the papers. So lower Dmax value and then the coated papers, but really, you know, when you look at the quality of the Canson range of the fine art papers, the difference is not that much greater, and I'm going to show you some examples. Because of just the nature of the paper itself. I'm going to show you, like, this is the same image. The one on the left I printed on Platine. You can see a little bit of the luster through the light box as we put the print up. And the other one is printed on edition etching, okay? So, you know, tonality, very, very similar. The one on the left, okay, the Platine has a lot more punch, okay? It does have this sort of sharper appearance, whereas the one on the right just kind of is a lot softer. It's still extremely sharp with the edition etching paper, okay, but you know, but a lot tamer, if you like. You know, for me, when I printed this image here, and I did enter this in competition and did, you know, very, very well, it was the edition etching that I chose to print it on, because it gave me the look that I was after, which was that really soft, matte, vintage kind of look to the image. And of course, with proper profiling and adjusting of the file, it is possible to get incredible shadow detail through these papers as well. And I'll talk about the technical, stuff, in a little while. Okay, so even when we look at a black and white print, the one on the left is platine, and you can see, just how rich the blacks are and still exhibiting full shadow detail. And then you've got the addition etching on the right, which is slightly softer. Now it's easy to see the differences because you're putting the prints side by side. But take one of the prints away. Like if I took the platine away and you looked at addition etching under the light box for the very first time, it would still look amazing. Okay, the minute that the eye has something to compare it to, you go, oh yeah, that one there is richer and that one there is a lot duller. So printed properly, these papers still do exhibit incredible tonal qualities and reasonably good DMAX as well. Okay, so when you look at the addition etching, you can see the slight texture on the paper, this is probably one of my favorites as far as art papers go. I mean, this one, the addition etching and the rag photographique, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. So once again, when you're comparing the two papers, okay, you've got the sheen of the platine on the right, and you got the matte of the addition etching on the left. So I guess with matte papers, you kind of look through the image a lot more, and it's a lot softer on the eye. Whereas the platine, as I said, it just goes a little bit, you do have that slight sheen on it, depending on the angle that you look at it. So with the addition etching that I spoke about earlier, what I love about this paper is the excellent image sharpness and incredible color gradation as well. It is slightly textured. Now, if you look at the image that's up on the screen, this was printed on, excuse me, on the addition etching for the very simple reason I wanted to bring through that softness, but also I had this incredible detail through the dress itself, okay, and I wanted that to come through, but I didn't want it to come through to the point of, say, of what a platine or a prestige would have done. Okay, I still wanted it to be prominent, but I wanted that softness to also prevail as well. Okay, so this type of paper is ideal for printing really detailed work, color photographs, and also, it performs really well with black and whites. So as I said earlier, the addition etching of when I printed this portrait, and you saw it earlier hanging up on the light box, I wanted the texture to come through with the scarf and of the aviator scarf and around the collar of his jacket, but also there's an incredible amount of texture coming off the leather as well in his jacket, which the addition etching just brings across really, really beautifully. Okay, then we go into the Canson rag photographique. Also very sharp, but this really does have a smooth velvet-like nature to the surface. And when you look at the image on the right, we wanted the sharpness in the center of it, which is what we got. But also, the walls have got no texture on either side of the shot, and I wanted that nice, beautiful, soft velvet, nature to them to come across into the print. And then as your eye moves in through the lines into the center, you're then faced with this incredible amount of detail and beautiful color that sits right in there. So your eye, moves around and plays around with the softness, and then the nice, beautiful, texture that's in detail that you're confronted with in the center of the image. The same thing goes with this image here, which I printed on rag photographique. When you look at the metallic structure in the background where the bride is, that also has an incredible smooth, satin-like or velvet-like feel to it, and that was portrayed through the paper as well. Okay, so like I said, you start to choose papers based upon what you're trying to say with your pictures. So as far as papers are concerned, Brighter Prestige being my utmost favorite, especially for competition stuff, Platine as well, and then we're moving to the addition etching, and of course the rag photographique. So for me, I probably always hover around those four papers to get my message across through my pictures. Okay, so but once again, really it's about exploring the world of paper, getting out there, with sample packs, printing the same image on different stocks of paper, look at them under controlled lighting, and see exactly what the image is saying to you. Is the paper complementing the image, or is the paper causing a jarring effect, because it's kind of clouding the message that you're trying to say. So there is no right or wrong. Having said all of that, it really comes down to personal preference and really comes down to personal taste. Now, also what I want to touch on today very briefly is the scientific side of how we get these images from our beautifully calibrated monitors onto paper. And this is where the geeky part starts. And I'm going to keep it as simple as possible, and perhaps we'll go into detail a lot more in future webinars. We'll just deal with the mechanics of printing and the technical aspects of what makes a good print. But first, we really need to understand, paper profiles, okay? So really, what are paper profiles? Well, the role of the printer profile is to reduce the number of test prints and eliminate them altogether, really. But really, more than that, it's about translating color and tonal image from the image that we see on the screen to what we see in print, okay? Now, how does this work? Well, when we look at an image on the screen, every pixel has an individual color with a specifically color value, okay? So a pixel has a color with a color value. Now, when we print this pixel, we send that pixel color with its specific color recipe to the printer driver. We'll interpret that recipe into dots of ink on a page that represent a particular color value. Now, in order to do that, because your computer speaks one language, your printer speaks another language based upon the paper that it's in there, we need a translator of how the information translates from computer to printer, and that is the role of the ICC profile. Okay, so the printer paper profile translates the color numbers from our monitor to the color values on a printed page, and that is probably the most basic definition. I mean, if we delve into what actually makes up an ICC profile, it's quite technical and there's a lot more to it than this, but the most simple way to understand what a color profile does is that it translates color numbers from one monitor, from our monitor, what we see on the screen, to the color values on a printed page. Now, how do we obtain paper profiles? Well, it's very, very simple. There's a couple of different ways of doing it. Number one is you download the appropriate paper profile specific to your printer model from the paper manufacturer. Okay, so when we create paper profiles, they're created for a certain printer type, for a certain paper, for a certain ink load. Okay, now you can download them from the Canson Infinity website, of course, and they are very, very good profiles. Or you can create one yourself, or you can get one made from a printing bureau. Okay, so let's look at the most simplest way of getting the paper profile first. So if you navigate to your Canson Infinity page, you can see you basically, it'll ask you what printer you're printing on. So, we print on Epson here. Select a printer, Shaw color, the P800. So that's the area that you need to address first. And then what will happen is, you say a little prayer and hopefully everything happens like this. You will get a list that will come up with all the papers on the left-hand side. The next column deals with media settings, of what you need to set your media setting in your driver. Now, what the media setting does, this is a very, very important setting actually, is it basically determines the amount of ink that the printer is gonna lay on the paper. Okay, so the profile has been written with this particular media setting. So if you change that, you will change the properties of what will come out in your final print. So, if you're printing, say, on brighter photographic, it's premium luster. Depending on where you are, depending on the driver, we have the media setting for English, media setting for US, media settings for Australia. They're slightly different names, and it'll also tell you the inks that are actually being used, whether you're using a photo black ink in your printer or whether matte black was used to create that particular profile. So once you tick the box, okay, you tick the box and you will download a profile. Now, the way you install the profile is very, very important as well, because otherwise your computer programs, like your printer driver, and especially when we're doing soft proofing in Photoshop, have no way of knowing where this information is. So the way we install them on a Mac, they sit in a folder in your Macintosh HD in the library folder. Inside of that library folder, there'll be a ColorSync folder. Inside of that folder, there'll be a profiles folder. And this is where you put in your profiles in there. And then they're easily accessible to the programs that need to use them, mainly Photoshop for your soft proofing, and then of course the printer driver when it does the printing and the translating. For Windows users, you just download it to your desktop, your profile, you right click and you just say install profile. But profiles live in there, so I don't use Windows. I did many years ago, but it's System32, spool drivers and color. That is where your color profiles actually sit. Now, for myself though, with my color profiles, I write my own profiles using one of these machines, which is an X-Write machine. It's an i1 table, so it allows me to print 2,500 patches, and it allows me to then really get into a far more comprehensive profile. Because what a custom profile does over just what we call canned profiles that we download off the internet is that it creates a fingerprint of the characteristics that the printer and paper that you're using. So this takes in consideration the ink set, the ink load, and in some cases and in some printers as well, the DPI that you're actually printing to, okay? And this does yield superior results. Even though all printers, come out, the same factory and all that sort of stuff, each printer has slightly different characteristics, and each paper has slightly, different characteristics. The idea is to create a fingerprint that is more accurate for your particular printer, your particular paper, your particular DPI, and so on and so forth, okay? So, I mean, really, when you look at it, it doesn't matter how carefully we make these devices, there is small inevitable variations which can make a huge difference sometimes in the prints that come out from our printer. So, investing in a custom ICC paper profile, if you're getting serious about your fine art printing, that's probably the way to go. Now, one of the questions I get asked a lot is this question of how do we go, from pixel to printed dot. And, we're going to address a couple of different things here today. Mainly the biggest one is, the DPI that we should be printing in, and what's DPI and what's PPI and all that sort of jargon that we get confused with. And it is really confusing. Now, let me address the biggest question first, which is PPI versus DPI. What's the difference? Now, PPI refers to pixels per inch in order to measure pixel resolution, okay? Which is what we use on our monitor. So when we open up a file in Photoshop, okay, we're referring to pixels per inch in order to measure that pixel, resolution. DPI refers to dots per inch, typically used to measure printed dots on a page. So when we start talking about, DPI, we're talking about the printing side of the equation. We're talking about PPI. We're talking about what we're looking on a screen, okay? Now, a digital image is made up of pixels, or otherwise called colored dots. Now, millions of dots together on a printed page give us the impression of a continuous tone image. Now, here's where a lot of people get confused. One pixel doesn't equal one dot of ink on a page when you print it. In fact, one pixel can in fact have, maybe hundreds of dots to create that specific pixel with that specific color recipe, okay? So a lot of people get confused, like I said, when we talk about image resolution versus printer resolution. We look at the printer resolution of the Epson and we look at 1440, 2880, and you start believing that they need the image to be to that resolution to get the most out of that print, okay? Which is not the case, because all you're referring to when we're talking about 1440 or 2880 is how fine those dots are going to be laid out on the page to give us that color, but also that impression of a continuous tone. So let's talk about printer native resolutions, okay? So, which is very, very important. So all inkjet printers have a native resolution, okay? For Epson printers, it is 360 pixels per inch. And I'm going to explain this why in a second. And for Canon and HP, it is 300 pixels per inch. And this has to do in the way the heads have been designed. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about Epson, being obviously an Epson ambassador and doing all my work through Epson, but the principles are no different than to printing on another brand. Okay, so let's look at the Epson printers. You have 1440 by 2880. Now, the recommended resolutions, okay, depending on the size that you're printing by Epson, okay, are 360, 270, and 180 ppi. Okay, these are the recommended resolution that you should be sending your file to print. Okay, the printer head, okay, with the current Epson machines is designed in multiples of 90. So anything past really 360 ppi, depending on the size you're printing, will actually risk the cause of banding, and also pushing a lot of that much data through the driver scaling. Okay, you're going to get all sorts of different problems as well, and things will really start to slow down. Okay, so the driver rasterizes using bicubic interpolation. I'm trying to keep this simple, but bear with me, folks, to 2880 based on multiples of 90, not 60. Hence, this is what we talk about: 180, 270, 360, not 360, 300, and 240, or anything bigger than that. Okay. So you need to keep this in mind. Okay. Now, I've had a lot of tests, done a lot of tests myself. I've also been in contact, you know, with you know, Epson beta testers. Recently had a conversation with Vincent Versace, who's written many books, as well as he was one of the ones that started the Epson Print Academy. Now, when he beta tests the printers, he's under strict instruction by Epson that these are the resolutions to use and nothing else. So even in the beta testing, you know, we test these resolutions. Okay. Now, some people are saying, you know, 720. Why not 720? Depending on the size of the print, maybe on a small print, you might see a visual or a perceptual difference in sharpness. But really, when you start going big, anything more than that, you will start getting into problems. So 360 really is the size and the DPI or the PPI that you should be sending your file to. The 1440 and the 2880 deals with how those dots of ink, remember, are being laid on the paper. It has nothing to do with your file. Okay. Having said that, do the test yourself. Send a file that you want to print at 360. Send a file, you know, bigger than that, and see what results come out. You know, and see what works for you. Okay. One of the other things when we start talking about printing as well is understanding the capability of the paper, and this is called, you know, determining the paper's black point and white point. And how do we do that? All I'm talking about here is understanding, you know, where the shadow detail starts to come into play, and what I can actually see in a printed photograph, and where the highlights start to, you know, become basically the pure white base of the paper. And the way we do that is we print a black point and white point evaluation. Now, this document is available for download. This will be available for download tomorrow on my website. I'll give you details about that, and it's a free download, so you can download it yourself. Okay, but the way it works, you can see here that we have circles or RGB values. Okay, and we print the image using just normal, you know, your normal profile through your normal printing process. We let the you know, we let the print to dry. We choose the appropriate paper profiles that are dry, and then under controlled lighting, we examine what black and white values are visible. Now, I have the luxury of owning a light booth, so I can stick the you know, the target under there and evaluating exactly where I start to see the shadow details come in. So this is what you're actually looking for. As you can see on this little video on the screen, you can see as we start going down the ramp of the RGB values, we get to 10, then we get to 8, and then we get to 6, and we get to 4, and then anything sort of below that starts to be, you know, very, very difficult to ascertain the difference. So, you know, once we ascertain where that point is, you know, what do we do with it? Well, quite simply, what we need to do is really limit, the tonal range of what the paper can actually deliver. So we open the image up in Photoshop, we look at levels, so we never open the original master file, we make a copy of the master file, okay, we change the output values, as you can see where the red circle is, to whatever that value is. In the instance I showed you with that particular test, it was around 2 to 4, so I would move that black point to either 2 or 4, knowing that anything less than that will just print as total black. In some papers you might get as high as 10, some papers you get as high as 12, depending on the profile, that you're actually using. So adjusting that output level, okay, is going to give you, basically put that tonal range right into what the paper can actually reproduce. So when you go to the products page, the black point, the Canson Infinity logo will come up, and you'll be able to download that particular black and white point. Now, while I still have time, quickly, what I want to do is just talk to you about soft proofing. So I'm just going to launch Photoshop, which is here, because I need to address rendering intent. So here we just have a test print, which this one here is one I downloaded off the internet, but it's very, very good in the sense that it has colors, it has a black ramp, it has a black point, it has a white point as well. But it allows you to then excuse me for a minute while we try to. There we go. So let me make these bigger so we can see them very quickly. So when it comes down to soft proofing, it's about now applying, the profile onto the actual through Photoshop to the actual image and seeing what changes are made. So when we go here into View, we're going to Proof Setup, we're going to Custom, okay, and up here we would load the profile. Here we're loading the profile for a Canson Infinity profile for a P800 for RAG photographic, okay. Now, when it comes down to rendering intents, I'll put up a slide in a second. You have perceptual, you have relative colorimetric, you have saturation, absolute colorimetric. The ones that you'll find using the most will be perceptual and relative colorimetric. Now, which one is right and which one is wrong? Well, there is no right and there is no wrong. The idea is this, which one should you use? The one that looks best for your image. So have a look at the image. If I change from perceptual to relative colorimetric, okay, the image changes and I will get a different result. So one of the other things we need to do here also is make sure we have the box ticked to emulate paper color as well and simulate the black ink that is being used. So this is all the information that's inside the profile as well. And you'll note that because we're printing on the RAG photographique, when you're comparing the left to the right, there is a lower Dmax. Obviously, the contrast has come down, but also you can see if anything else has happened with your colors. But relative colorimetric, perceptual. Now, for me, when you look at perceptual as opposed to relative colorimetric, perceptual does give you a little bit more pop for this particular image, but it varies depending on what you're trying to print. So do this test each and every time. The other thing also I suggest to you when you're doing soft proofing is that to fill your image up into the actual screen itself, okay? And go into full screen mode and get rid of all your tabs on the side and get rid of anything that's going to be in the way, anything that's going to distract your eye from thinking, what is monitor white and what is actually paper white, okay? And it's very easy then to go through and have a look at what the shadows are doing for a specific, for a specific paper, and whether you need to adjust anything like that as well. So soft proofing, very, very important part of the printing process as well, okay? And one that you can't ignore. So let's go back to the presentation itself. So, as I said, rendering intents, relative colorimetric, technically what it does is the out of gamut colors. If you have any out of gamut colors, I move to the nearest point within that gamut, okay, based upon the printer profile and capabilities of the paper. And the perceptual or out of gamut colors are moved into a gamut and their relationship is preserved. Okay, so really, at the end of the day, you need to choose the one that I guess best suits your image. Okay, like I said, there's no right and no wrong. It really comes down to aesthetics, and printing is all about aesthetics as well. It's the one that looks best. So so a lot of people say, ask me, how do you get the most out of your fine art papers? Well, besides obviously, printing them correctly and doing your black point adjustments, getting a custom profile made really helps. And also using, an excellent paper with excellent DMAX, which is what the Canson Infinity art papers like the rag photographique and the edition etching actually display as well. Because not all fine art papers are made the same. And not because I'm a Canson Infinity ambassador, but because when you compare it to other papers, there is an incredible visual difference to see. So that's all I have for you today. So if you want to follow, my adventures on Instagram, Rocco Ancora Photo, or at Capture to Print, which is the printing side of what we do, or Facebook, and there you will see, details about, future seminars and classes that we're doing online. So Jane, are you still there?
I am still here, Rocco. So thank you so much. That was extremely informative and very interesting, and that's come through from some of the comments that we've received so far. So first of all, I think I'd like to ask the audience, at the start I mentioned the fact that we were going to run a short competition. So if you can answer these questions correctly, then we'll randomly pick a winner and we'll send you a box of Canson Infinity paper. So if you want to just message me, the questions are: number one, what is Rocco's favorite paper for award-winning prints? Number two, what is DMAX? And number three, what does PPI mean? Please feel free to answer the questions through the question facility. But whilst you're thinking about that, there are a couple of questions from the audience, which I'd like to ask you, Rocco. So the first one is from John. Yep. So his question is, what is your preferred way to make pure black and white prints? Setting in Photoshop or letting the printer handle it, and why?
Okay, first and foremost, when we start talking about black and white prints, through the digital workflow, now a black and white print in Photoshop is still an RGB image. So we keep the image as an RGB image, but it's a black and white version of that. And all it means is that the RGB values for each particular tone are all equal. So you create a stunning black and white through different techniques, and perhaps that's a topic for another webinar one day when we talk about how to get the most out of how to make really amazing black and whites. Then for me to obtain a really good black and white, I'm printing on Epson and I use the advanced black and white mode. Okay, this yields incredible results. Those of you that have used it will know exactly what I'm talking about. But it is a really good way of doing black and whites. You need to get nice, beautiful, neutral black and white tones, because sometimes when you're printing with a color profile, especially if you're printing with a lesser quality profile, you will get an introduction of color through there. Some black and whites can exhibit, magenta or green casts, depending on just how good that profile is. Certainly, if you're doing a custom profile, and you're really fingerprinting that printer to a totally different level, and that paper choice, paper combination, and ink set, okay, you'll be able to get nice, beautiful, neutral gradations out of your profile, and you still be able to print it with that color profile in mind. But really, when you look at the advanced black and white mode, which is probably not something a lot of people know about, using advanced black and white, but it does give you an incredible result. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. We have a lot actually, so I'm just going to pick a couple out of the ones here. So From John, we have a question. How do you currently prefer to mount Canson paper for print competition and for clients? Do you use double adhesive tape, backboard with glue, hinge tape, question mark?
The thing is with mounting for competitions, you know, when you look at that sort of stuff and the way that the I guess the print gets looked at, but not only the print, but the way it's mounted as well. So, you know, really high quality mounting is important. The idea is to use, you know, acid-free adhesive boards because that will ensure that the print is kept as flat as possible. Now, these aren't the cheapest; they are quite expensive, but they're worth the investment. At the end of the day, if you're printing for awards, you know, and you are putting your best work forward, well then. You know, you can't really start taking shortcuts because you will see them in the final results. So using you know, acid-free adhesive boards, and that's probably the best way to do it. Now with a lot of that stuff, we actually outsource that part of what we do because it's a little bit specialized and you know, you don't want to start ruining prints and start sticking them, and because once you stuck them on this, you can't get them off. So there is a technique involved with that, but basically the board will give you a better result.
Thank you. So we'll take one last question. So this is from Antonio. What is the recommended environmental conditions to store the papers for printing? Are they specific to different types of paper?
Yeah, I mean, when you're storing paper for printing, keep it in the box and keep it in a, you know, keep it in a dry place. I mean, don't stick it where, you know, the sun's going to shine on it and then, you know, or a damp place. You know, we keep our papers in a drawer. They're in their box, and you know, it's a dry place. And yeah, that's you know, because especially with the fine art papers, you know, they are an organic product as far as the base is concerned. It is a cotton base, and they will absorb moisture, and their properties will change based upon, you know, the conditions. So avoid damp conditions. You know, we have a, you know, an air conditioning unit, and even on, you know, in summer when we have humid days, we have it on basically on the humidity reduction, so it takes the moisture away out of the air, so that the you know, the paper isn't absorbing it because the paper will react to its environment. So keep it in the box, keep it away from the light until you're ready to print, and yeah, you shouldn't have any problems.
Thanks, Rocco. So, question from me. When are we going to see you next in the USA? When we're going to be able to see you in person?
Okay, well, I have a concert. No, not true. I have a workshop, not a concert. From Capture to Print, which will be in Las Vegas, October 29th and 31st. So this is 3 days of you know, I guess printing, capturing images, everything from lighting, exposure to post-production to creating beautiful, stunning prints. So the idea of the workshop is that on day one, we do a lot of shooting and we talk about you know, lighting, we talk about optimizing exposure and how we get the best or the most out of that. Day two, we bring it all into post-production and we play around in Photoshop. We look at how we control color, how we use color to evoke emotions in images, but also we look at how we produce really mind-blowing black and white images as well out of Photoshop. And day three is all about the printing component, how we get the most out of those files onto printed paper, and how different papers, you know, relate to, you know, saying a very different message. So 3 full intense day. Now, those, you know, there's a few seats left for that for October, but now all the details there are on the website. So it'd be great to see you all there. It'll be awesome. And the class is quite small. We limit it only to 13 or 12 participants. Okay, so we keep the class small for the very simple reason that we want it to be more of a hands-on, almost one-on-one experience than just having a huge class where people are learning all the different speeds, and it just becomes, you know, a little bit you know, a little bit hectic at times, you know. So keeping the class small and that way everybody gets a little bit of one-on-one time with myself, and I'll be able to address, individual, stumbling blocks in their process that need to be addressed. So hope to see you all there. Of course, before that, you'll be able to see me on the Canson Infinity booth at Photo Plus in New York, which we're really, really looking forward to, aren't we, Jane?
We are. It sounded like I set that question up for you there.
Yeah, you did. Like you had the slide ready.
So thanks everybody for also sending in the answers to your questions. So I'm really pleased. I picked at random Helen Marriott. So Helen, I will message you directly to get your address, and we'll arrange to send you a box of Brighter Prestige, which is Rocco's favorite paper. So thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks very much to Rocco for his time today, and we've got some amazing comments about the webinar, so that's fantastic. If you do have any questions or any comments, or you need any help with anything that Rocco talked about today, then please feel free to send us a question through the contact form on our website or through the email address for the webinar. So thank you very much, and goodbye.